I'm going to go out on a limb here today and say that most of you in this room like to read. You wouldn't be called the friends of the library if you didn't. But I wonder how many of you have ever really considered the dangers of illiteracy. Because after all, if you can't read this, then you probably can't read this either. Which means you probably can't find a job that's going to let you put enough of this in the bank. Illiteracy is a surprising problem in the United States. It's much bigger than you would expect. It's not like polio. We haven't eradicated this with a vaccine. 1 in 4 children will grow up illiterate. 14% of American adults right now cannot read or write, or can only do so to 6th grade level, and are functionally illiterate. This causes a large increase in the crime rate. This causes the economy to struggle and to be weak. This is a serious problem, and we can only correct it through educational reform and community outreach programs. So let's look at exactly what the problem is. As I've mentioned to you, 14% of Americans are illiterate. Now that may not sound like a lot of people, but that's 32 million. 32 million people that cannot read and write. And let's put this in perspective. You probably didn't know that 75% of state inmates in state prisons are illiterate. 52% of federal inmates cannot read or write. And altogether, in our nation's jails, be they state or federal, 63% of the prison population is illiterate. There is a marked increase in the crime rate as the high school dropout level increases. But these numbers pale in significance when you consider the impact on the economy. Annually, the U.S. government loses $240 billion, that's billion with a B, each year to illiteracy. U.S. companies alone average a $40 billion loss of what their profits could be. Again, billion with a B, to illiteracy. By comparison, if we raised our literacy rates to that of Sweden, we could add $162 billion to the gross domestic product automatically. So how do we go about doing that? Well, the first step is education reform. Again, 14 million adults that cannot read or write. Now obviously, we have to find some way to help them. Government programs should be created and funded to reach out to these people. Now, granted, a flyer on a telephone pole is not going to work if they can't read it. But you can reach out to them through the radio. You can reach out to them through spoken word. There are employment offices around the state and around the country where programs can be created to work with adults to teach them to read. Spend 3 months with them. Spend 6 months with them. I guarantee you the return on your investment will be great enough to justify the expense. Now when it comes to school, we have to keep the kids in the classroom. You know, dropout rates, they fluctuate. Sometimes they increase, sometimes they decrease. Regardless, the administrators, the teachers, the guidance counselors, they know the students that are at risk. They've already identified the ones that are at risk for dropping out. Programs should be created to grab a hold of these kids and keep them in the classrooms, to encourage them, to help them solve the problems that are pushing them out of school, to make sure they graduate. Because by 2020, 60% of jobs in the United States are going to require some sort of college education. Be that associates, bachelors, masters, something. A high school diploma is that first ticket, and if those kids don't have it, they're going to be in the unemployment line. The second thing we need to do is create a love of reading, to reach out to them, to the community and the libraries. You know, education reform has already taken place. The No Child Left Behind Act, however, even though it sets tough standards down for schools as what they must teach, it's put Common Core in place, but what it does not do is create a love of reading. That's where programs such as LeVar Burton's Reading Rainbow, which was recently relaunched after a hiatus of being on TV, that's where those programs come into place. That's where you as a library comes into place. You have summer reading programs, you have story hour, you have pajama time for kids, you have all sorts of things just to get kids in the door. And that is the first step. Let's get them in the door. Let's teach them that reading is a great and wonderful thing. And maybe that'll start them down a journey of lifelong learning. Now, if we do this, we can see a tremendous benefit. But if we don't, consider this. The dropout rate will continue to increase. Our crime rate will continue to increase. Our prisons will become overcrowded. And most importantly, we will begin to fail to compete on a global, state, and local level because the arts and sciences will stagnate. There will be no production, no innovation. However, if we catch this problem, if we prevent illiteracy from growing and even get rid of it, take steps to eradicate it, the crime rate decreases, the prison population decreases, the burden on the tax base decreases, the arts and sciences flourish again, and we compete on a global and economic scale. It's the impact of reading. I'm not going to tell you that it's going to solve all the problems. It's not a panacea. It will not cure everything. But it's a really good first step. And the only way we can stop this, the only way we can prevent the spread of illiteracy, and hopefully eradicate it like we have for polio, well, the vaccine for illiteracy is government funding, economic reform, and community outreach.